Well, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to this emergency live stream. However many of you join, I was about to get into bed. I was sitting on sitting on the fence about whether or not should I make a live stream. Should I do a live stream for the impending upcoming ultimatum deadline at 1 o'clock British time or 8 o'clock Eastern time of the United States. And obviously, as I'm sort of reading something else, switching off for just 5 minutes, Trump has announced a ceasefire. I am partially on a space. I'm also online with you guys, obviously. I haven't actually had a chance to really look at the news. I've just been reacting to it. To be honest with you, are we strictly surprised? Are we strictly surprised that Donald Trump has decided to do this? And yes, I'm not wearing a shirt or anything. I actually was in the gym and then I was going to bed. And this does Iran know about it? Yes, it's been announced. It has been announced that it's happening right now. Let me bring up the news. As far as I can tell, from what I understand, it's been announced. There's been a ceasefire. It's all over X, and regardless of how you feel about it, yeah. Let me see this now. Oh, okay. So Trump has agreed to it. Interesting. Okay, let me bring up the BBC live sort of feed here, because this is probably the most reasonable. Trump has announced the ceasefire with Iran if the Strait of Hormuz is open. Right. Well, let me change the caption there. I thought it was that he was announcing it. Goodness me. So he agrees to he agrees to the proposal. Now, is Tehran going to agree to it? Not sure if they are, actually. I think it shows you who actually holds the power. Yeah, let me just change this, guys. I need a team behind me. I need some. I'm guessing not. No, apparently not. But hang on, let's just read this here. So we've got Donald Trump says that after discussions with the leadership of Pakistan, there will be a ceasefire between the US and Iran if Iran agrees to allow traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. There will be a double-sided ceasefire. I'm not sure what a double-sided ceasefire is. I think a ceasefire is immediately double-sided if it's a ceasefire. Trump continues saying that we will agree to the 2-week ceasefire subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that's a bit redundant, really, because Tehran has made it very clear that they don't intend to allow the return to what was before. That they have no interest of returning to the new normal. So to what came before, right? The new normal being that they want undisclosed, like absolutely assurances, unnegotiable assurances that the United States and Israel will not strike Iran anymore, that there will be a complete cessation of hostilities, not just a pause, that there will be a complete reparations made for damage to the country. These are, in the eyes of most people, maximalist, but so were America's demands, the 15 points. So in my gut reaction to that is that it's just going to be rejected by Tehran unless they can sort of claim a win, that the US has backed down first, that they beat the Americans in this war of attrition, in this war of choice, in this war of ideological struggle. As far as I can tell, it reminds me again of the 12-day war back in in July, in that both sides were able to claim a win. Trump could claim that they had dealt a significant blow to Iran's infrastructure, to their nuclear program, obliteration, all that rubbish. And then Iran could claim that they made a just response, a proportional response to America by striking their bases in Qatar. So that is sort of what comes to mind there. I mean, I don't know, a lot of excitement about this, including myself. I just saw sort of ceasefire and announce, but it was obviously cut off halfway through the sort of the title of the notification, and so on was cut off. So to me, this is, I mean, there's nothing more I would like than the war to be, well, over, paused, because I would like some normal evenings of going to bed at a reasonable time and getting control of my my YouTube strategy. Because right now I'm just on all the time, and I don't frankly know what I'm doing. Whether I'm doing streams or recorded videos, it's thrown my entire sort of social media plan out of the window a little bit. But anyway, that's more of a personal issue. As I say, personally, to me, this is it's too early to say for me whether the Iranians would accept this. On the one hand, I think that they would, because whether or not we agree that one is winning or losing, or avoid using such basic rhetoric, binary rhetoric, it's pretty clear that they have been badly hit. And suffered significant casualties, damage to the country, the overall system. But the system, in terms of the IRGC, still functions. So I think they would obviously, like anyone in a major conflict, like a reprieve. But I also wonder, would they actually? Because maybe they think that they can squeeze more out of the Trump administration. The fact that Trump has decided to suggest that this war is accepted, or the ceasefire, excuse me, is accepted after this war, is surprising, to say the least. It was pretty clear that Trump was, incensed and wanted to continue this no matter what, but he's decided not to. So, or whatever, he's suggesting it, or he's putting on a strong face. The Trump administration will frame this as an act of generosity. They will frame this as they're being kind, they're being decent. But in reality, they are. They're not. I think this is more a position of necessity, not out of generosity. And I wonder whether, again, the Iranians will try to milk this as much as possible. I'm going to switch over to X, actually, just to see if we can get some latest updates on here. If you guys don't use X, I know. Yeah, just looking through here. Let me see what some of the latest notifications are on. I'm also on an X space, actually, just listening at the same time, so might get updates from that as well. That's a good point, actually. Fate Hook's news is a very consistent and good page to follow, based on their sort of object coverage, but also sort of critical analysis like that. That's a good point. Whether or not how quickly would we start seeing traffic flow through the Strait of Hormuz? It's pretty late in Iran right now. I mean, obviously they're going to be awake with everything going on, but it's still worth considering how quickly will it open. This is also more likely not to Ian Bremmer's point. This isn't necessarily really a proper ceasefire. It's more like a temporary ceasefire. But realistically, if the Iranians agree to it, they will agree to it on the condition that it will be followed through with a much more comprehensive arrangement. And I wonder whether or not the United States will agree to that. Right now, it's a big win for Pakistan as well, actually, just to take a step back. The Pakistanis have been working overtime to try to be the central player, the central go-between. Vali Nasser, one of the guests we had on earlier, was talking about the importance of states, but largely as couriers. They were communicators, exchangers of the information, but they weren't necessarily intermediaries. But they weren't negotiating on each other's behalf. They were simply just transferring information about what was being said between each side. From my experience or understanding of the role of, say, Oman, it's a little bit more than that. But certainly in this case, the Pakistanis have really stepped up for whatever reason. Every country has its own vested interest as to why they try to put themselves in the middle. You can think of Turkey during the earlier phases of the Ukraine war, or also Iran, Israel, and Palestine, when Erdogan was really trying to be seen as a sort of mediator before Israel's operations pushed him towards being largely critical and no longer sort of willing to take an objective or whatever mediating role. But in this case of Pakistan, it's going to do wonders for the relationship. I would go as far as saying that I think that the Pakistanis are doing this because they want to improve relations with the Americans, with Trump. They've been largely ostracized, sidelined for a good while at this point. So in my mind, I think that the Pakistanis trying to really sort of be the central player in all of this, and also because they have a broader, although I never thought it was an immediate threat, of obviously ensuring that Iran doesn't disintegrate internally. It's the threat of the Balochis in the southeast is a major territorial concern. The separatist movements between Pakistan and Iran, and we've seen, I think it was late last year, brief missile exchanges because of tremors of separatist movements in the southeast of Iran and Pakistan. So there was sort of a mutual understanding about wanting to quash that sort of uprising in that area. Balochistan basically covers a large proportion of southwest, if I can bring this up here, a large proportion of southwest Iran, a bit of Iran. It's more predominantly Pakistan, but you can see here, hang on if I bring up the image properly. Let me see where it is. Yeah, so it's a proportion of so if you look at this image here, the Balochistan covers so Balochistan and then Balochistan. So altogether, it's quite a significant chunk, predominantly of Pakistan. But if there was enough movement on the Iranian side, that would trigger a likely spillover effect into Pakistan, which is obviously a huge. Well, it's arguably existential for the Pakistanis, and given the security state of the country as it is, being led by the military junta, that would be a seismic situation for the Pakistanis. So they have their own interests there. Okay, so here's the actual statement. So let's actually read the whole thing. So based on conversations with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir, Pakistan, and wherein they requested I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran, was it really? And subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening. It's quite a lot of asks. I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire. Well, it's a ceasefire by default. It's double-sided. You don't have one side. You don't have. Well, I guess you can. Okay, you can claim a unilateral ceasefire, but it's never really a ceasefire if the other side just continues, is it? A bit redundant. The reason for doing so is that we all have already met and exceeded all. For some reason, he captured. I just love reading. I love deciphering his messages because he's got random capitals in places. And is that because he's typing so quickly, or the military is really important? But anyway, exceeded all military objectives and are very far along within a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. I mean, it was more peaceful before you started. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran. That's up from 5. And believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. Almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the United States and Iran, but a 2-week period will allow the agreement, okay, in capitals again, I suppose, for Leaton, to be finalized and consummated. On behalf of the United States of America, as president and also representing the countries of the Middle East, it is an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. Okay, Piotr, retain your composure on air. You are live right now on X, on YouTube as well. Retain your composure. Let's decipher this a little bit more. So I've already shared my thoughts around Pakistan. There was discussions of Oman and Turkey on the sidelines, but Pakistan, at least in the past week, has really stepped forward. So there's that one. Destructive force being sent tonight to Iran. Okay, deliberately vague. Destructive force, meaning that sounds aerial to me. Doesn't sound like a ground force. And it doesn't sound like he's sort of saying around Iran. It's to Iran proper. Maybe I'm overreading that. Now the critical section. Subject to the, and interesting, he calls Iran Islamic Republic of Iran. So he's being formal in address. Agreeing to complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. So those 3 things are obviously not necessarily mutually exclusive, but because I don't know how much Trump would just accept. I mean, how do you define complete? That's a very arbitrary metric. Immediate, well, in 20 minutes. Again, a little bit difficult to ascertain. Safe opening. Okay, so no strikes on what? American freighters? Any freighters? Again, all of that is quite open to interpretation, if I'm honest. And to be honest, and additionally, I think that Trump's going to have a degree of leniency. I think in the past, I think I saw a statistic about 3 hours ago stating that in the past 3 days or since Friday, 45 vessels had traversed the Strait of Hormuz. So that's more than at any point since February 28th. It's obviously a fraction of what it was prior, but, you know, is he going to be content that we see a sort of a return to, say, 70% of the daily traversals, right? How much passaging or safe passage, how many ships have to be going through the Strait of Hormuz for Trump to consider it open? I mean, if the Iranians are not striking or putting up blockades, okay, that's relatively easy to sort of to measure, but complete and immediate are the main 2 sort of complete, particularly immediate. I mean, if they give them a half an hour window, an hour over this stream, right? If I stream for the next half an hour or for another hour, technically we still have an hour before this this deadline. Maybe Trump's doing this and hoping that within the next hour Iran agrees. So maybe immediate that over that time frame, but complete. To what extent does that mean complete? Complete as in a return to pre-28th of February, pre-Operation Epic Fury, or just complete by relative standards to what it has been before, as in yesterday. It's I'm that sort of maximalist or level of demand could be a sticking point, and you may well just see Tehran reject it. I'm waiting to see on updates here just if there is any response. And I will obviously, well, you know, let you know, but oil prices have already slid. Brent crude is down almost 6%, while US oil, traded oil, was almost 8.5% lower. Wow, that's nuts. Okay, so well, the markets again, is Trump all doing this? Another speculation, is Trump doing all of this because of the markets? Is he just trying to, I don't know, manipulate the markets? Obviously, that's probably clear. But some people said he would taco. I'm sure most of you watching, given how you look at Trump, are probably thinking taco. But yeah, it's to be honest, guys, I'm trying to keep up with it as much as all of you. I would love to have a another person on as well to get their thoughts, but I didn't have time to reach out to anyone. So here we are, just flying solo. But yeah, we've got a lot of things to cover. So anyway, let's continue reading it. Sorry, also I thought I was sharing this page, so I've been reading it whilst it's not even on your screen. So let me share the actual proper screen. I will be doing more live streams, so I'll be more natural at these. Very interesting. Where is it? Not that one. Expose that one. There we go. Yes. Okay. So I was just, so this is the section here. Complete an opening safe package of straight Hormuz. Agree to suspend bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. The other thing that I've just seen come through is that this does include Israel. So Israel will be involved with this. It's not going to mean that I don't know what to say. The Israelis will continue. There was always that concern. And to be honest with you, I thought that the Americans would just sort of not have much choice in accepting that the Israelis continue to operate unilaterally. But perhaps they do finally have a bit of agency over that. Tasman News Agency, which is linked to the IRGC, has said that Trump retreated. So the Iranians, I don't know. My inclination is to think that the Iranians will agree to this, just because they need a break, but also because they can sell it. They will work round the clock, making sure to sell this, to frame this as much as possible. Now, some of you who've watched me have said, or I've been accused. Some people have said that because I'm hosting certain people or speaking about things in a certain way, that I'm sort of sympathetic to Iran or pro the IRGC, which I'm not. I'm just very clear on the fact that I don't think that this war has been going quite as well intended for the Americans as they expected. I don't think anyone realistically thought that the Iranians would be able to go toe-to-toe with the US, but quite clearly they've done a better job of outlasting, enduring. The resilience is there, and ultimately, yes, you can blanket the country, you can flatten as much of the infrastructure as you like, but if the political system, the actual system that runs in the country, is there, then you cannot say that you've beaten them, because as we saw with the state of Afghanistan, the Taliban still came back, even though the country had been ravaged by 20 years of war, and Afghanistan is a lot poorer and a lot less educated on average than Iran is. The Taliban were still able to hold out long enough to retake the country eventually. So even if you flatten much of the infrastructure of Iran, which, well, the US government like to claim. Also, I find it absurd, this sort of the framing of the US government, that sort of by sheer numbers, it's like they just project it based on the number of casualties or damage. We kill 11,000 things have been destroyed. That means we're winning. It's like being in sort of high school where you sort of like who's got the biggest who can do the biggest amount of pull-ups on the playground or whatever. It's like bigger number equals more success. Yeah, sure, you've destroyed 11,000 targets, but if one of them's a sort of a Kalashnikov, an assault rifle, it's not really much of a big target, is it? So I looking at stupid arbitrary measurements like that it's just daft, to be honest with you. So I never really paid much attention to that. You've got to look at the operational side of it. What are the Iranians capable of doing, despite the fact that they have been facing major attacks. So anyway, there's that statement. What else does he say? Received 10-point proposal. So that one, I hadn't seen the 10-point proposal from that. And I don't know if it had been published, actually. Let me see if I can bring that up. Because the last time I was aware of it, as in a day ago, that's how much things are changing, was a 5-day proposal. Okay, so it was, what's Iran's 10-point peace plan? Trump says is not good enough. So Trump has accepted what he was calling a few hours ago not good enough. Right, that sounds good. That sounds very Trump-esque. Yeah, he's in charge of it. He's on top of it, guys. He's very much on top of it. I don't know. The more that this continues, the more pathetic, the more sad, the more. Yeah, I just feel very sorry for him, to be honest with you. The rate at which he's been reacting, behaving, his statements. I don't know. As I say, I like to always believe that there's a more intelligent aspect behind it, that there's a greater plan, that there's more nuance. But I feel very sorry for the bloke, to be honest with you. How anyone can be this desperate, this angry, this petty, pathetic. I mean, talk about insecurity. As a man, you have to project sort of through your bravado, your ego. It's such a caricature. If you ever watch a comedy or any sort of, if some of you have ever watched Shakespeare or something, you'll see those plays where actors are portraying a certain type of character and they have to exaggerate all the mannerisms, right, for comedy. It's like that. I know he's a reality TV star, you'll be writing in the comments, but it's still, I don't know. I hate reality TV, right? I think that's part of my problem. I hate reality TV. So I just find it every day I wake up, I'm like, okay, we can't actually go further, can we? We can't, and we do. We keep pushing the boundaries. But my only hope is that we've reached peak moron. My only hope from this is that we can actually come down to a level of insanity, right? Sanity, that we can return to a degree of modicum, right? That after the midterms, Trump's power will be checked. We've had our fun with absolute lunacy. People who are, I'm not saying you have to vote for career politicians or stuff, but people who are actually qualified to do the job, not just popular because they say the right thing or because they know how to rage bait you or appeal to your emotional, what triggers you, right? Trump is, how can we get worse than what we've seen in the past few hours? An overt threat of genocide, sort of even speculation that nukes might have been on the table. How far is this circus going to go, as I made in my video 2-3 days ago? How far is this going to go before we start waking up and like, okay, maybe we should walk back a bit from the precipice of absolute, apocalypse, right? Half the posts I've been seeing on the internet today are sort of apocalypse now. Anyway, so here are the 10 points from, I'm reading these off my phone, by the way. So the 10 points, according to official media reports, guarantee that Iran will not be attacked again. Okay, well, Trump sort of said that. Well, he's suggesting they won't do so in the next 2 weeks. Permanent end to the war, not just a temporary ceasefire. Well, that's a sticking point. Stop Israeli strikes in Lebanon. I mean, Israel is privy to this. Not privy, is seemingly a signatory to this agreement, is on board. But does that mean they're also going to agree to operations against Hezbollah? Because from Israel's perspective, that's an existential threat, and also they're on their immediate border. And so while Iran is one thing, Lebanon is very different, and Hezbollah is very different. And Israel claims that the Lebanese government aren't doing enough to disarm, dismantle Hezbollah, and therefore they have to do that, and that's why they're occupying, southern Lebanon. Lift all US sanctions on Iran. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. I find that absolutely hard to believe. End regional fighting against Iranian allies. I mean, if the Trump administration are suggesting the adoption of a ceasefire against Iran, then I would assume that that means, at least from an American perspective, a cessation of hostilities against their proxies as well. Reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Yes, I mean, well, that's the core. So clearly this is about the economy. It's economy, stupid. It's clearly about the economy for Trump and the fact that he is aware that the US economy, his personal reputation, whatever it is, cannot continue to take the hits because of the Strait of Hormuz closure. I think that really is an indication of how much of a pressure point the Iranians have. Even if they can't beat the Americans in conventional combat, they can put so much pressure on the Strait of Hormuz. That is the decisive point. Associated with that is impose a, well, this is point number 6, impose a $2 million fee on every ship passing through the strait, which, I mean, that seems a little bit far-fetched to me. 2 million fee on every ship passing through. Share the fees with Oman. Now, I had read reports in the last few days that the Iranians had approached the Omanians to discuss this. And what I think what's very interesting about this is that the Americans are not talking to anyone really, but the Iranians are. The Iranians are using Trump's continued threat of escalation as an opportunity to try to frame themselves as the more responsible actor. The Russians do this. The Chinese will do this. Those opposed to American hegemony will try to frame themselves as the more responsible actors in moments of conflict. I mean, in an economic sense. So when the Chinese and the Americans were having the trade war last year, the tariffs, the Chinese would try to frame themselves as the more responsible actor to the international community by saying, "Hey, look, we want to seek a drawdown in the tariffs. We want to see a reduction in economic warfare, and emphasize that the Trump administration or the United States more broadly is the irresponsible actor, is the reckless behavior, the reckless power, the disruptor." And I think in this regard, the Iranians are doing something similar. They are. I mean, it's quite textbook of their method. They do this quite often. They will emphasize that they are seeking to draw down escalations, but can't do so because of risk to their, existential threat from the Americans or Israel or something like that. They did something similar at the end of the 12-day war, and I personally, to me, I think that the Iranians are playing this quite well by approaching their surrounding neighbors. The Omanis have always been relatively consistent. I don't know if loyal is the right word, but they've been consistent in trying to act as a mediator between the two. They were the mediator in Geneva before this whole war took off in February. So I think the Iranians approaching them demonstrate a sort of a what's the word? A sort of a sign of respect, a sign of intense sincerity. I don't know. I mean, this is the IRGC we're talking about, but I think they're also trying to think about the day after tomorrow. They're trying to think about if and when this war comes to an end, how can they live in some degree of peaceful coexistence? How can they minimize the military fallout from this? Obviously, the Gulf states are absolutely pissed that they've been targeted by Iran, but the Iranians will argue that they've been defending themselves and that this entire situation was yes, there was tension, there were flare-ups, but ultimately, much like February 24th, whether or not you think Putin's to blame or NATO's to blame or provoking Russia or encompassing Russia, the point is that Putin was the one that decided to move the goalposts with his full-scale invasion on February 24th, and it was Trump's decision to launch Operation Epic Fury on February 28th. So the Iranians will argue, in my opinion, that this is they are the victims and that they are trying to manage the fallout from this by engaging their near abroad. And from what I do understand from the people that I've spoken to over the years, the Iranians and the Saudis, as we know, have been trying to normalize is too strong a word, but they had been trying to improve their relations. The Chinese brokered this important rapprochement about 3 years ago. But I mean, I don't like to oversell that because it didn't really lead to too much. The two were simply improving, beginning to trade a bit more. But there was still obviously a lot of tension, a lot of, well, underlying resentment for damage done by the Iranians to Saudi infrastructure, Saudi's relationship with America, obviously, for the IOGC side. But the point being is that they had been trying to make a concerted effort to rapprochement, right, to improve relations, to just sort of accept that this is the way things are, and just sort of get on with it, right? A bit like what's been happening with Afghanistan. You've seen the Russians, you've seen the Chinese, you've seen different communities over time. I think even the Americans have been sort of hosting or increasingly talking to Taliban representatives, versus 5 years ago when everyone was like, no, we will not deal with the Taliban at all. They are the illegitimate, illegal, whatever government of rulers of Afghanistan. We will not recognize them. And as we know in international relations, recognition is everything. You can be the most functioning state, but if you're not recognized as a state, then you're not a state. It's that intrinsic value. And like Somaliland is a more functioning state than Somalia, but because no country recognizes it, it's not a state. It has an institutional framework, it has a currency, I think they even have passports. It's actually a functioning state relative to Somalia, but no one recognizes it, so it doesn't exist, or can't exist, or can't operate as a state. So in the case of Saudi Arabia and Iran, they have to sort of accept that Saudi Arabia is like, well, Iran is run by the IOGC, it is run by the mullahs, the Ayatollah. We're just going to have to find a way to live with that. And MBS has been, I think, very pragmatic. He's been making some pretty big overtures in the recent years. Obviously, the killing of Khashoggi in 2018 was a huge deal for a lot of Western countries. Guys, also, if you have questions, please do, I don't know, well, I'll try to get to some of them, but if you want to send a super thanks, I think that's how they are automatically put in the questions section. I don't know if you want to support the show, but that's what I've been told by people. If you want to see questions, you should, drop me £1 or $1 or something. One question I do say, what are my predictions for the next month? People seem to claim that I have a bad prediction record. I've actually been on point with most events. I never state when I think exactly they're going to happen, but I did accurately predict that Putin would invade. After I read some intelligence reports, I thought it was like, he's seen Biden in, he met him in June. This buildup is not because he's just going to do it to then pull them all away. He's taken the calculated assessment that he can get away with doing this because Biden is not going to follow through in the way that Trump would. So I got that right. Anyway, my predictions for this next month. I mean, to be honest with you, I never thought that this conflict was going to go beyond April. It's difficult to assess because well, hang on, let me read the rest of these things. So the other 3 points were simply share the fees with Oman. That's what it made this tangent. Establish rules for safe passage through the strait. Well, okay, so the rest of them use the fees to rebuild infrastructure instead of paying reparations. I mean, that's not Trump described it as a negotiable framework. I mean, to be honest with you, no country's going to just accept paying reparations. If Trump accepts this term, the sticking points for me are possibly Lebanon and Israel's view of that. End to the war. I mean, what, are we just going to sign an armistice and Iran and America stay in a perpetual state of conflict like the Koreans are technically? If you didn't know that, the Koreans never signed a peace agreement, so they technically have been at war since the 1950s. Impose a 2 million fee on every ship passing through the strait. That, I think, what I do think would be negotiable with this is use fees to rebuild infrastructure instead of paying reparations. I think the Americans would accept some version of that. I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what. I'm not an expert on the strait, and I'm not an expert on the intricacies of the details. Establish rules for safe passage. Well, yes, I think that's something the Americans would agree with. share fees with Oman. I think that's a hand from the Iranians. Actually, that sounds like they're making an effort to sort of compromise, because they didn't want to do anything like that, from my understanding, about a few days ago. So I think that's quite a big compromise on their hand. $2 million fee. I mean, okay, I could see that being watered down to a certain amount, but in some ways, I mean, why shouldn't they charge a fee? Was someone's argument. And I mean, the Strait of Hormuz is not an artificially built passage like the Suez Canal, but if it means the Iranians will be more appeased, I don't know. I mean, I find it difficult to really have a feeling on this. I don't know how I feel about this. Lifting all sanctions is not going to happen. The American government is not going to lift all sanctions. So I think what the Iranians would accept is that if Israel stops striking Lebanon, then they will drop their $2 million fee or something like that. If the Americans lift some sanctions, then they will ensure that there is safe passage guaranteed through the Hormuz. Those sorts of tug of play here. But to answer the original question that I saw, what do I think plays out in the next month? Personally, I would focus on the next week, but I didn't think that this war was going to go beyond beyond April. People were talking about it being months. I never saw that. Not because only of the military limitations, but because of the political appetite. No one in the world has the political appetite for this, and I think that I maintain that the final decision on the Trump administration's, or specifically Trump's, mind to launch all of this was because he was fed up with the lack of progress in the peace talks. I do not think that this was obviously the plan, the framework was there months in advance, much like what we saw in Venezuela, right? The plan to initiate Operation Absolute Resolve was there months in the making. However, they decided to initiate it on February 28th because Trump just got fed up that evening, possibly just that evening or the day before, and he thought, fuck it, I'm just gonna do this. If they won't respond to peace, I'll respond with force. And because he thought, because he's Trump, I mean, I still don't like to believe that he actually thought this, but because he thought, well, we did it in Venezuela, we can do it in Iran, he thought, yeah, we can do it. Obviously, the difference being, this is not a snatch and grab operation. This is not, I'm not a military analyst. Also, you know, I'd love to have Preston or Chris Cappy or some of the other great military vets that we sometimes have on the show to sort of talk me through some of this, but or whatever. But I cannot imagine this being a snatch and grab operation, because Tehran is inland. The IRGC in Iran is a much more militarized and capable nation. Caracas is right on the border, or right on the coastline. It's in America's backyard, so to speak. They've been planning this for months, and so they thought that this operate by, and also because the meetings that were held in the presidential home in Tehran, when they took out much of the upper echelons of the regime, that's not like it's the only time they meet there. It's a reoccurring thing that the senior military figures, the Ayatollah and so on, would be meeting on a Saturday, right? It's a reoccurring thing. And so they decided that this Saturday or that Saturday, maybe it's once a month, I don't know the intricate details of that, but the point is that they knew that they would be there, and they decided to strike them there, but they were wondering which Saturday to strike. So in my mind, Trump decided, well, screw it. If we don't get anywhere, and given the growing tensions, they were probably meeting more often, in more frequency, with more people present, boom. So I personally think that Trump just decided to flip the switch impulsively, and no one was willing, or he didn't believe, or whatever it was, that this war would continue in this way for this length of time. Maybe they thought by taking Mojtaba out as well, by taking out, because the family's there, all the senior commanders, the president, foreign minister, and so on, would be enough. But that, I think, severely underestimates the contingency plans Khamenei had made after the 12-day war, let alone that they have been planning for this for 30 years, for 50 years. So I don't think that the Trump administration really ever intended for this to be some months-long campaign. Anyone who claims otherwise, I think, is just so... what a fantastic piece of mental gymnastics. Yeah, I mean, it's 12:30 here, guys. I'm not going to lie, I wasn't ready for this, so I am having to try and wing it. And also, it's quite difficult talking for 45 minutes straight without anyone else to sort of bat ideas around. So yeah, forgive me if I'm not completely coherent. I'm thinking of different things. I would write things down, but that means I have to go and get a notepad, and I don't think you want to look at an empty screen. So anyway, point being is that I don't think that this was long planned. I think they had the framework in place, the operational capabilities, but the strategic intent to do it was decided relatively last minute because of Trump's impulsivity and he got fed up. He was like, okay, if we can't talk to them, then we'll force them. And because of that, this has gone on now for 6 weeks. It has decimated the market, so the Trump administration seemed to have manipulated it to their benefit, with insider trading. So regardless of what happens by April or the end of this month, they will be much wealthier, and a lot of people will have been a lot poorer. But I don't think that this war will continue beyond April. I think ideally you would see the temporary ceasefire. Let's run with the assumption that Iran agrees to this. I need to make sure that we can see whether or not they have. Okay, let me just read this. Iran Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, it sounds Italian, announces that, quote, if attacks against Iran are halted, our powerful armed forces will cease their defensive operations. He said that for a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces. Right, so Iran is willing to agree to such terms, but if they are able to wield unilateral power oversight over the strait, which I'm not sure whether the Americans would agree with. So I'm just grabbing some water here. Not much of it left. Okay, so this is the... Let me bring this up on the screen so we can all read it together. So we've actually got the full statement from the foreign minister now. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. North Korea launches unidentified projectile. Are we serious right now? The Israelis tell Can News we were surprised by Trump's decision. So clearly the Israelis haven't been informed as much as we like to say. Okay, so this comes from the official account of the foreign minister. Let me just share the screen for you guys. Let me see here. On behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran, I express gratitude and appreciation for my dear brothers, Prime Minister of Pakistan Sharif and Field Marshal Manur, for their tireless efforts to end the war in the region. In response to the brotherly request, and considering the request by the US for negotiations based on its 15-point proposal, as well as announcement by POTUS about acceptance of the general framework, as well as announcements. I hereby declare on behalf of the Iran's Supreme National Security Council, the National Security Council is one of the most important organs of the system. If attacks against Iran are halted, our powerful armed forces will cease their defensive operations. So for a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with due consideration of technical limitations. I'm not sure what that means. That last bit means is that their technical limitations. I mean, I would presume so. But anyway, so I don't know. What are our thoughts on that initially? No mention of Lebanon, no, but I guess that's sort of, I need a 2-week vacation. I just came back from one. I was I was meant to be on holiday in Tunisia. For those of you interested, a very beautiful country actually. Small hidden gem, and it's where the Arab Spring kicked off in 2010, which triggered the downfall of Gaddafi, the civil war in Libya, and then Syria, and all that, all from little Tunisia. But very interesting country that I recommend you visit if you can. But still, so this statement, what do we make of this then? So is the chosen is winning, war comes back in 2 weeks. I'm just thinking here, guys, whether I would find it unlikely. The steps that we're seeing now are striking me as like both sides do want to try to make this work. There are sticking points, but that's inevitable. These two are arch nemesises. Let's be honest. They are well, and they see each other as an existential threat. So realistically, yeah, I would assume that they aren't going to agree on everything, but from the language that both are saying, and I think what's more important is that Trump has moved first. The fact that the man with the ego, the man who likes to claim he can do whatever he wants, it's unusual. It's not going to be easy for him to do that. Let's be honest. And as I say, I think the Iranians are going to be. Milking that. I think they're going to be milking the framing. They're going to be emphasizing to third-party actors that they are the more responsible one. They were looking to do this, but Trump was unwilling or was obsessed with trying to destroy the country, sending it back to the Stone Age, trying to conduct civilization erasure. That we had no choice. We were reacting. We were in, our back was up against the wall. This is about survival. This is about our existential survival. And therefore we didn't want to, Gulf states, we didn't want to, but we were going to. What I would be interested to know is how much pressure has maybe come from the Gulf states. I find it difficult to believe that this was solely a Pakistan. Maybe they're the ones that are publicly leading the talks. But keep in mind, actually, that's a good point. Some of you who've joined me since I made the video, but back in October, November, the Saudis and the Pakistanis signed a strategic partnership of mutual defense pact. Now, was Saudi Arabia going to come to the aid of Pakistan if they were attacked? Or would Pakistan come to the aid of Saudi Arabia if Iran just decided, screw it, I'm going to bomb Riyadh? Well, one questions, but the point is that in this kind of context, probably the Saudis have been, working behind the scenes, giving information, suggesting whatever, consulting strongly with Pakistan, who are then leading the public calls for a ceasefire. That could be quite feasible. Saudi Arabia is obviously the key player in much of this, and their relationship with the United States, the petrodollar, all that, I think is going to be critical. Excuse me. Go to bed, knucklehead. No, I'm not going to bed yet. No, we're not going to go to bed until we have a clearer sense of what's going on. I was already in bed, and now I'm wide awake. So no, I think that the Saudis, the Pakistanis would have been communicating significantly on this, and possibly even between Iran and Saudi Arabia. We saw during the 12-day war that there were subtle signs of backdoor diplomacy between Riyadh and Tehran as well. So despite what we know on the surface about the relationship between those two, there's always a lot more movement than we can ever imagine. And it's only after the event happens. Yeah, that's right, Ollie. No bed until peace deal. Exactly. So I'm also going to stay up until we've got 27 minutes until the deadline passes. I personally don't think that it's hopefully going to mean anything. I think that this is a classic example of the 11th hour. Every country is like, shit, let's move. Pakistan leads the way, and suddenly we've got a ceasefire, we've got an arrangement. I find the best word to use in these kinds of circumstances is arrangement, because it's not a pause, it's not a ceasefire, it's not a cessation of hostilities, it's not an armistice. We don't know what it is. Arrangement is a broad word that encompasses many of those different potential framings. So we have some kind of framework which both sides seem to be pushing towards some kind of arrangement. Be that a temporary reprieve for the next 2 weeks, which is about a deadline being pushed back, and then more of a substantial ceasefire, or is it a temporary ceasefire, which eventually is established into more of an actual armistice? I find it, I'm just trying to imagine what the world will look like when we see Trump joining President Brzezinski at a table signing a peace deal. I can't imagine that scenario. What, these two meeting in Dubai or meeting in Geneva? I find that hard to imagine. But in principle, that's what we're going to have to expect, right? An official cessation of hostilities, which means a proper peace treaty, a proper peace deal is signed by both countries to actively demonstrate that the 2026 US-Israeli Iranian war is over. If they don't sign that, then it's just a perpetual pushback of conflict for a later year or a later month. So unless there is a concerted effort that the Americans agree that Iran has basically taken over largely control of the Strait of Hormuz, which is a de facto loss for the Americans, or they give up some significant sanctions, or the Iranians agree to whatever it is on their side, then we don't really, nothing really changes. Unless the Iranians agree to a significant reduction in their nuclear program, or they disarm, etc., which I don't think they're going to do. I can't see an actual peace deal being signed. A sort of long, drawn-out civil ceasefire or armistice, perhaps, but both sides stay in a effective state of war for an undisclosed amount of time. That's how it would work in international law, in theory. Not that Trump really cares about that sort of thing, but technically speaking, that's what it would become. It would become a ever signed peace deal, unless when Trump left office, the United States, the subsequent POTUS agrees to an actual peace deal. But then some people will claim that because war was never declared officially, then they don't have, no peace deal is actually relevant because they were never at war. This was what did Trump, I think he even called it a special operation, didn't he? So no, I don't think Trump's exception could be applied to catch Iran off guard. This is too formal at this point. The Israelis have said that they're surprised by it. The Iranians have released an official statement. Trump's made it pretty clear on major forms of socials and mainstream media. I find it difficult to think that. Well, I mean, actually, to be honest, I don't know. I was going to say that I think it would be hard pressed to imagine Trump just walking back on this and double playing bluff on this one, but maybe he would, considering he was tacitly suggesting genocide about 5-6 hours ago. I don't know, guys. It's yeah, he did call it specifically a military operation. He did. Yeah, the parallels with Putin are too uncomfortable to ignore. Oh boy. Okay. Right, let's read here. So I'm reading from a US State Department. Their take is the Pakistani intervention has given both Donald Trump and Iran a ladder to climb down. Okay, that's yes. I mean, that sort of is. This is BBC analysis for you. I don't only read the BBC, don't worry. I'm just using it as a sort of. It comes after Trump's extraordinary and unprecedented threat of an American blah, blah, blah. So we're kind of back to square one. There you go. Yeah. Okay, guys. That I could have just said that in the past hour. All right, we're back to square one. All right, good night. No, I'm not not going to bed yet. This is American diplomacy. We negotiate with bombs and playing the stock market, Peter Hexer. Problem is that the Iranians have always been absolutely clear that their end game is to deter the Americans from this cycle of diplomacy and then bombing Iran. So this might not be a long-term solution, but it certainly backs down from where we were earlier today. Yeah. Okay. Right. So conditional ceasefire. Okay. Okay. So here are the three. Excuse me. Here are the 10 points of the conditional ceasefire according to Iran. I read them earlier, but this is a nice, clean sort of summary there. I might just actually highlight that and put that in a note. But essentially, to me, Trump has said, we will stop all attacks, and so will Israel, if you open the strait. And they are saying, the Iranians have said, we will open the strait if the attacks stop. So they're sort of talking past each other, maybe deliberately, but in essence, we do seem to be in this in a cessation of hostilities for now, because they've both, in their own way, inadvertently said we're not, we won't attack you if you don't. If you open the strait, and we'll open the strait if you don't attack us. So it kind of is an agreement. Yeah, you first. Yeah, exactly. New World Order. That's one hell of a tagline. Yeah, they are a win for Iran. I agree. As I say, I mean, I'm going to reiterate it. Some of you may roll your eyes, but I'm going to reiterate it. Bottom line for this is that there are no winners and losers in a war. It is who is relatively winning, who is relatively losing, or who is closer to their objectives versus who is further away from their objectives. And certainly in the case of the Americans, their original objectives of regime change, leadership change, whatever, not there. The Iranians' objectives in this instance, since they were the recipients to this development, was to just hold out, to survive. And assuming that Trump doesn't follow through with yet more attacks in a couple of weeks, we never know. Maybe the Americans will use the next 2 weeks as a way to, conduct intelligence and find a way to take out more of the senior IRGC system officers. But the Iranians will obviously be making contingency plans of their own. So we can't assume too much either way. But bottom line is that this is not a great situation for the Americans. It doesn't look like a relative win for them, because Iran is still fully in control of the strait. Oh, let me read this. TDS is real. TDS affects intelligent, educated, and rational people. That is 90% of the world except MAGA. Smart people don't like me. That's the smartest thing he's said, to be honest with you. Thank you for that, by the way. Appreciate the 2 subs. Was that subs? Is that what you say? Thank you for the support. More live. I like the stream of consciousness. Well, I'm feeling slightly unconscious. Thanks, mate. Can you talk about Israel? Okay, well, I mean, I'll be honest that I used to cover the war in Palestine, or the Israeli Gaza war, or Israel Hamas war, because more recently, or I did more often, and then I stopped because I found it simply impossible to know how to talk about it. There was so much vitriol. It's the most complex, sensitive, geopolitical, historical problem of our time, I think, and therefore I found it less and less worth trying to talk about it, because I genuinely didn't know what I felt, or how to talk about something that I myself felt difficult to mentally process. That's a bit of a word salad, but bottom line, I stopped talking as much about Israel and its relationship to Palestine. That being said, when it comes to the broader Middle East, I think that the Israelis have been very well. People, on one hand, people argue that the Israelis have a desire to simply protect themselves, that they are taking preemptive measures to defend themselves against regional threats like Hezbollah, like Iran, like the proxies. On the other hand, people will argue that the Israelis are overly aggressive, or they are taking it upon themselves to coerce other countries to occupy and abuse their military power because of their support by the United States. Now, I'm going to be honest that my sentiment for the Israeli government is not very high. They are an ultra-nationalist government, and people like Smotrich and Ben Gvir are not pleasant people. I have very strong antipathy towards those two specific individuals, and I don't shy away from really thinking that they have some pretty clear aspirations when it comes to territorial, surrounding territory, let's put it that way, and their vision of what Israel could be in some scenarios. So when it comes to Iran, clearly they have, Netanyahu, of course, as well, have always had this desire to deal a decisive blow to the Iranians, to the IRGC, to the Islamic Republic. And while they may have had the capacity to do so in a limited sense, this conflict that we see now with the unrestrained involvement of the United States is what they've needed or desired. The Americans provide the logistics, the intelligence, whatever, the surveillance, and the Israelis can provide perhaps more specific know-how, the niche knowledge of Mossad's coverage of Iran for years. I think it's pretty clear the extent that they were on the ground. I'm not pretending to be an expert by the way. I'm just giving you my limited take, which is from a grand strategic sense and what I cover about from a great power political perspective. But to me, I think that the Iranians have demonstrated a greater resilience than Israel even anticipated, at least in this past month. And clearly, if the Israelis didn't feel that the Iranians were more competent than they are claimed to be, they wouldn't constantly reference them as a major threat. I think that whether or not you like the Islamic Republic, you can't deny that they are quite good at doing quite a lot with not very much, in the sense of they've been able to hold out against the Americans and Israelis for the past 6 weeks now, suffering significant damage and destruction and whatever, but the system still functions. It's still, and sort of look, again, I emphasize optics, on the international stage. If you're a third party nation, say in Africa, and you're looking at the war in your near border in the Northeast, in the Middle East, in West Asia, and you're thinking, well, that bully America, neo-imperialist America, right? I'm role playing as a third nation in Africa. Why is the American military attacking Iran? And Iran provides a very sort of sophisticated statement from the foreign ministry. Then you're going to see that as Iran being more measured, more diplomatic, more responsible as a player. Goes back to what I was saying half an hour ago, versus the recklessness, the vitriol, the swearing, the insane tweets, the overt threat of genocide by the man or the leader of the free world, right? As a third party nation, who are you going to think is being more reasonable in this war, right? I'm not endorsing any one side. I'm just simply trying to emphasize how other governments will look at this and why there is so much support, right? Some of you don't like me hosting some guests because you think that they're too pro this or anti that. Well, there's a lot of support for Iran. There's a lot of, and it's not even because they support Iran, it's just, it's anti-America. So that's the point. So in my mind, I think that for the Israelis, they have often wanted to try to think of Iran as something that they can deal with, but they know that they can't independently without the United States. Yes, they have the Iron Dome, but Iran's capacity to shoot quantities of drones and projectiles to simply overwhelm the Iron Dome, that's the point. The Iranians are very potent. When Qasem Soleimani was taken out in 2020 by Trump, in the final days of his administration, I think that was a significant galvanization for Tel Aviv to really trying to infiltrate more into the IRGC, more into Iran, and find ways to dismantle from within. When the Israelis took out the head of Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, in what was it, late last year? No, whenever it was, in Lebanon, that was a significant and incredible operation. A bit like the operations the Ukrainians did with the trucks almost a year ago now. The Israelis spent months preparing that with the pages, which would all explode, all activate in a very specific and consistent way. And that's incredible. That's an incredible display of military and intelligence covert operations. But to take on Iran at this level, in this way, I mean, you can argue the 12-day war exposed Iran for being a bit of a paper tiger. I don't think you should ever underestimate your enemy, to paraphrase Sun Tzu. And clearly the Iranians, I think, have had more stockpiles left than people like to claim. But personally, to me, I think that the Israelis were always looking for the opportunity to do this, to deal a decisive blow, as I said early on, to deal a decisive blow to the Iranians, to the IRGC, to the Islamic Republic, to set them back far enough. If they ever realistically thought they could decapitate them enough, decapitation strategies, as they're known in warfare, are possible. But again, this is not a small paramilitary force. It's not a militia. It's one of the most comprehensive systems in the world, the IRGC, the entirety of what makes up the Islamic Republic, of which the IRGC is arguably the driving force now. You can't just eradicate a few guys at the top and think that you've done enough of a job. You need to take out the entirety of the senior system. You need to take out the middle level. You need to significantly, well, I hate to use this term, but gut the system, so that enough that there is complete disarray, that there aren't enough senior people left who have a strategic vision. There aren't enough people. The junior officers, yes, okay, they might be officers, but they're not well placed enough. They don't have enough experience. They're not old enough. They don't have enough confidence, whatever it is, to take up the mantle of keeping the system, as in the Islamic Republic, going. But Israel didn't manage to do that. And whilst they were taking out a few key figures in subsequent days after the initial strikes, I think the IRGC had taken enough precautions, taken enough countermeasures to limit just how many people they might lose. And if they did, then they immediately had someone else that they could put back in place. So I think for Israel, they wanted to keep going. I think that's obvious, but they can't without the support of the United States war machine behind them. And therefore, and because the US is feeling constraints with the Europeans limiting what bases they can use, if the British cut out their bases, if the Germans, if more and more British European nations began to limit what America could do in their airspace, make use of their bases, that would have been a significant setback for their supply chains, for their ability to sustain the war indefinitely. So I have been talking to camera now for the past 15 minutes or whatever, looking at your points. So maybe more information has come through, but simply put, I don't think the Israelis were expecting this. And I think that's because they want to keep going. But equally, they don't have infinite capacity to do so either. So to me, I think that we have to be cautious in assuming that this is over. I do think that the arrangement is going to hold for now, but I don't think it depends. You can in essence agree. This is the other thing, and people seem to think that because it's been announced, it takes effect immediately. That's why I was dissecting Trump's statement, perhaps slightly over the top, but it's not as simple as stating that that because both sides have sort of said you first or spoken past each other, that the arrangement actually exists. So what I'm seeing right now is that there are early warning systems of potential strikes still happening. I'm seeing one from Saudi Arabia. I'm seeing another EW for missile launch from Iran towards Israel. So there's been 3 in the past hour. I'm just reading here, Emmanuel Fabian, who is the military war correspondent for the Times of Israel, I think. He's just written here, after sirens sounded in southern Israel due to Iranian ballistic missile attack. So Iran still seems to be launching missiles, albeit in a very minimal capacity, but there still seems to be activity occurring, where therefore sirens are now sounding in Bahrain, according to another update just coming through here now. So there seems to be a few pockets across the Middle East where we're seeing arbitrary missile strikes. It could just be 1, it could be 2, but it means therefore that Iran isn't going to just sit down and not do anything. They're going to, perhaps in a minimal sense, still just provoke, maybe, I don't know. This is a big update. A first round, so this is coming from Barak Ravid. He is he's a great account. If you are on X, I encourage you to follow him. Global affairs correspondent for Axios and a CNN analyst. All right. Well, hang on, let me bring this up. How do I share the screen? Share screen. Yeah, so a first round of negotiations between the US and Iran on an agreement to end the war is planned to take place in Islamabad. That's interesting. Do we reckon that means, and the key question, does that include Lebanon? As I've said from the beginning, this war, if it did spill over into involving Hezbollah, Lebanon would become the predominant flashpoint more than Iran in some ways, or Lebanon would suffer more because it's obviously a country which is a lot smaller. It's been ravaged by conflict for many years prior to this, like proper conflict on the ground. I would hope that it does. The country's suffered enough as it is. Yeah, that's been confirmed by the talks that are set to commence with will be based on Iran's 10-point. Oh, wow, I think that's very interesting. Maybe I'm overreading that, but the talks that's a massive win for the Iranians. If the Iranians' point plan is being from it, I think that shows you just how much movement the Iranians made, right? The compromises that they made. I think that's a big deal. I think that's a huge deal, actually, for them to reject the. Hang on, I'm just going to bring up that one live. I just want to bring up the 10 points again, actually, because I think that's quite a big deal. Well, that's great, BBC. Well done. BBC's out of date already. How do you update it? Come on. Right, here we go. Right, share this out. Okay, so 10-point plan. So complete cessation of the war on Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen. Okay, so based on that tweet, this will involve all fronts. Cessation of the war on Iran with no time limit. Ending all conflict in the region in their entirety. I feel like I'm just reading the same point. All conflicts in the region. Well, that's the same as, okay, right. The first 3 points are sort of, okay, 3 is just 2 and 1 together. Reopening the Strait of Hormuz. That's an incredibly vague, open-ended interpretation. What does that mean? Who's opening it, managing it? Maybe they mention it down. Establishing a protocol and conditions to ensure freedom and security navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. Again, completely vague. Is that an international agreement? Is that a Iran-led one? Is that a shared agreement between Iran and Oman? Do the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, have a say in that? Full payment of compensation for reconstruction costs to Iran. Okay, so would that be, is a full payment of compensation for reconstruction, is that based on income from the toll, or is that from reparations? 7, full commitment to lifting sanctions on Iran. I mean, you can fully commit to lifting sanctions, but what quantity of sanctions, right? That's not commitment, because the full's carrying quite a lot there. If it was commitment to lifting full sanctions or all sanctions, that full commitment, well, okay, the Trump administration can completely agree to lifting sanctions, but if it's lifting one sanction, then I fully commit to the one sanction being lifted. So I think that you have to read number 7 with a slight, release of Iranian funds and frozen assets held by the United States. I mean, a lot of these statements are incredibly open-ended. Release of Iranian funds. Okay, well, what? Half of them, 1/10 of them, all of them? I think these are deliberately vague because the Iranians want there to be a back and forth. Oh, hang on. There's another update here. Hang on, guys. Let's read this. Oh, wow. Right, it's official. Oh, this was 10 minutes ago. Why did I only just see this now? Okay. We're on the deadline. 10 minutes before the deadline, we have an effective, immediate ceasefire. I'm pleased to announce, I'll share the tab. With the greatest humility, I am pleased to announce that the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States of America, I want to read that in the American accent, I want to do the sort of the American, anyway, sorry, I'm taking the piss. Along with their allies, have agreed to an immediate ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon and elsewhere. Interesting that they explicitly mentioned Lebanon. I guess it's the main hotspot. I warmly welcome the sagacious gesture. I've never seen the sagacious. Never seen that word used in that context before. I warmly welcome the sagacious gesture and extend deepest gratitude to the leadership of both the countries and invite their delegations to Islamabad on Friday, April 10th, to further negotiate for a conclusive agreement to settle all disputes. Both parties have displayed remarkable wisdom and understanding and have remained constructively engaged in furthering the cause of peace and stability. We earnestly hope that the, quote, Pakistan is really, really pushing the boat out to own these talks, that the Islamabad talks succeed in achieving sustainable peace and wish to share more good news in coming days. Wow, that's significant, guys. Okay, so it is what's the word? It is official. Yeah, let me just see here. It is official that shall I give him a follow for that? Yeah, I'm going to give him a follow for that. That's huge. That is huge. But now, obviously, my attention wants to return to the 10-point plan, because if this is going to be used as the framework for negotiations, it's a very, to reiterate what I was just saying, it's very open-ended. Apart from perhaps points 1 to 3, the other 7 points are pretty open-ended. Number 9, which was Iran fully commits to not seeking possession of any nuclear weapons. I mean, again, on face value, that reads pretty cut and dry, doesn't it? It reads pretty clear that they won't seek possession, but can they seek the capability to build one? right? There's still ambiguity around capability. Immediate ceasefire takes effect on all fronts immediately upon approval of the above condition. Okay, well, that's number 10 sort of been... Number 10 is the Iranians have left that, right? Okay, so that's interesting. Let me just update this. Hang on. I just want to see if there's any other information I'm missing. Maybe they've got... Bloody hell. Well, you saw it here first, guys, right? Live on this stream. You weren't watching BBC News. You weren't watching CNN. You were watching independent media. No, I don't know if it's a Chamberlain movement. Oh, God, that's not a good one. Okay, now let's get serious for a second. Okay, so... Iran's Supreme National Security Council, SNSC. This is the point. All these bodies are still functioning. The Supreme Council, the National Security Council, the Guardian, the Council of Guardians, whatever it's called, the one that's selected, Mojtaba, they're all still functioning. You have enough clerics, you have enough senior ayatollahs, the mullahs, the whatever. There's still enough of them to make the government function, to make the country function. That is the sticking point with all this. Anyway, the SNSC has said in a statement following the announced conditional ceasefire that negotiations will be held in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, within a maximum period of 15 days. Well, okay, it's going to be on Friday. So what is the so now it's just turned 8th. So the next 2.5 days. They will be held so that, quote, Iran's victory in the field would also be consolidated in political negotiations. See, they're already beginning to try to frame this as a win for them. The political narrative building, the political framing, the post-war. I know I won't get ahead of myself, but the point is the performative politics has already started unabatedly. The statement has gone beyond the 10-point plan that had been announced, and the statement has said that the US has agreed to guarantee not to repeat its aggression against Iran. So this is Iranian state TV. So I don't think the US government is going to agree to this. The continuation of Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of uranium enrichment, lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions, termination of all resolutions of the UN Security Council and IAEA, Atomic Agency, payment of compensation to Iran, withdrawal of US combat forces from the region, and the cessation of all hostilities on all fronts, including against the Islamic resistance of Lebanon. Big emphasis on Lebanon. Iran seems quite keen to keep Hezbollah alive, or to keep Hezbollah there. Yeah, so points 1 to 3 to the original plan. Personally, I'm going to look more at this one. I'm going to look at the original diplomatic communique. There's an important emphasis I always like to make, which is that diplomatic communiques are incredibly important. If they are legitimately sending a 10-point plan to Pakistan, who seems to be at the forefront of the negotiations, that's incredibly important. When they made their comments, not what they send in bluster on social media or whatever as threats, you have to look at the official communiques they send in a diplomatic called, say, to the UN. So when the 12-day war happened, one of the critical documents that I thought went slightly unnoticed, and was proven correct in the aftermath of, was their communication to the UN, because they were telegraphing at the highest level of multilateral diplomacy, at the highest level that the international community has since established. So there's a fly around here. Was they were openly indicating to the people, to the world, that we want to draw down, but we are not going to do so if we feel threatened by the US. We will respond, but we're looking to respond in a way that allows us to draw down. And that was communicated in the in the communique to the United Nations Security Council, to the United Nations General Assembly, whatever, back in 12-Day War. So anyway, the point I'm making is that I think that this one, the original 10-point plan here, is the framework. The statements are all very vague. They're open-ended. There's a lot of full commitment to lifting sanctions. As I said before, you can lift, but some of the sanctions. Interestingly, that there's no mention of the nuclear powers. Of the removal. Right, Iran fully commits to not seeking any possession of nuclear weapons. Is completely against. Well, that and that. So either I think this is the state media, trying to put on a brave face for the Iranian people, obviously. But I wouldn't read too much into this one. I think this is more them doing the propaganda. And I think that the 10-point peace plan is the framework that would be used, because I've seen online as well some insider suggestions that Trump has seen that and obviously took that as that's a negotiable framework. That's a framework that we can negotiate on. So I think that they're just, the Iranians, as they have done, it's quite characteristic of them, they're mocking him a little bit. I think they're taking a piss a little bit. I think they are being slightly tongue-in-cheek that we can get away with it. But yeah, I think that this is an impressive. Again, I'm not endorsing it, but I think it's a rather. Excuse me. So let's go back to Twitter. Not that one. Not that one. This one. So, Operation Epic Failure Fury. Excuse me. Sorry, did I misspeak there, everybody? Operation Epic Fury will have 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that is. Oh, well, there you go, everybody. We had a deadline for 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but it turned out it was always meant to be 8 a.m. deadline. And that deadline was actually for Hegseth to come out and make the announcement. That's quite funny, actually. I might make a tweet of that, actually. Well, there you go. But yeah, let's get back to you guys. So, Trump always chickens out. I don't know if he chickened out. Did he chicken out? Do we think he chickened out? What do we think he did? Yeah, no. So okay. So let's for entertainment purposes, let's run through what do we think actually happens. I've been streaming for an hour and a half. That's a record, guys. I literally haven't stopped talking for an hour and a half. I'm going to get some water. Bear with me. I'm literally sitting next to my fridge, so it's not that far. I have some water. Right. Okay. I feel like a gamer. I feel like I should be on like Discord or whatever. I should be streaming because I've got some mates of mine who do like Discord gaming, and they stream for like 6-7 hours on end. I don't know how they do it. Oh, that's good. I got. I'll be honest. My girlfriend got this. It's a blueberry and raspberry sparkling flavored water. It's quite nice, actually. Anyway, right, let's get into this. So, and for some reason, she's okay with me staying up at like 1:15 in the morning to do a live stream about this while she goes to bed. She's actually a hardworking member of society, unlike myself. But anyway, so let's talk about this then. So, realistically, what do we think Trump's actually going to do? Right? Let's go back to this just for. Maybe I'm putting too much emphasis on it, but I think it's worth just using this as the blueprint because it's the best thing we've got right now. So, reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Well, they're obviously going to agree to that. Establishing a protocol and conditions to ensure freedom and security. Well, everybody wants that. I think the Americans would agree to a sort of a joint oversight, if you like, between the Omanis and the Iranians. But it's sparkling water, so it's like very gassy. Anyway, I'm a bit of a gaslight. I like gaslighting. There's a pun in there somewhere. Never mind. I like my puns, but yeah, no. So realistically, the key players in that are obviously the Gulf states and Oman and Iran. So Iran and Oman agree some kind of framework that they share a toll, and the Gulf states get like a discount or something. You know, that's going to be a multinational conversation. And I think that will be quite complicated to do, but I think that will be workable, and I think the Americans will be, or Trump administration will be, you know, amenable to that. I think they'll agree on that. Full payment of compensation, that's not going to happen. I can't imagine anything less likely than the United States paying reparations to the Iranians. I think they would prefer to do it in some kind of, you know, they will allow the Iranians to keep a proportion of the money that they get from the Strait, right? Decide that there was that 2 million figure I mentioned earlier. So maybe they agree that the Iranians can keep a proportion of that. Full commitment to lifting the sanctions, well, that's obviously not going to happen. Full commitment in this regard could be that the Americans fully commit to some kind of sanctions relief, right? As I say, it doesn't say full commitment to lifting all sanctions. So that's open to interpretation. Full commitment to lifting some level of sanctions, maybe. But maybe that is Iran. If Iran fully commits to not seeking any form of nuclear weapons, but that goes back to what the JCPOA was anyway, right? For those of you who aren't aware, the Iran deal, as it's more well known, was what the Obama administration helped negotiate in 2012 or whenever it was. And Trump hated it. He ridiculed the JCPOA, saying that it was a terrible deal. It was a joke of a deal. I can't remember the exact words, but he berated it. He hated it, saying it was an insult. And then the whole escalation in tensions with Iran that have been in the past few years was because Trump unilaterally decided to leave it. Now, again, I'm not defending everything that the Obama administration did, but they tried something which, well, I think was better than what we've seen in the past month and a half, to be honest with you. I prefer diplomacy over war, but maybe I'm just, a toffee-nosed Brit and appease the enemy. I'm being sarcastic, guys. But no, the JCPOA was a very flawed deal, and clearly the Iranians abused it. But Trump is not going to come away with something better. And if anything, it might be actually worse. Some of you may have seen the podcasts that I've done, interviews that I've done on other channels occasionally. And one of the points that I've made, because I think it's quite amusing, I think I said it on a previous conversation with Daniel Davis, is simply, it's like the NAFTA agreement, right? That was renegotiated to be the USMCA, right? It was no different. The literal only difference, the biggest difference, was Trump put the United States at the beginning. He wanted America first, literally, literally USA at the start of the word. Like, I'm not joking. So, I bet will this deal be USIR or something, USRA, RA? I don't know. He's going to negotiate a deal that is pretty much the same, just with a different name, or maybe his bloody name on it. And then he's going to get his board of peace to sign off on it, because the board of peace have been really useful, haven't they? They got bored of peace very quickly. I know you've probably heard that pun before, but anyway. Release of Iranian funds and frozen assets. To be honest with you, I feel like number 7 and 8, the Americans might agree to some kind of commitment of providing some access to certain funds if used for. They'll allow the Iranians access to their funds as a form of reparations, right? They'll sort of frame it as, we'll allow you access of your money to help rebuild your country. And we agree to a sort of minor sanctions relief if you agree to, not nuclear enrichment and obtaining your weapons stuff, etc. That's sort of where I can see that arrangement going. Is it realistic that all of that's going to be met? No. But my only concern with all of this is that if Trump doesn't feel satisfied with the talks, we just end up back with square one again. We're just back to what the hell we were, I don't know, 6 weeks ago. People were like, "Wow, they're not operating in good faith. Let's bomb them again." I think my mouth is so dry now that I actually need to take some water. Or maybe it's because I have the water here now. I'm like, oh, I can take more water. Anyway, this is interesting. So Trump is, well, I'll just read it to you. The alleged statement put out by CNN World News is a fraud, as CNN well knows. The false statement was linked to a fake news site from Nigeria. Well, Nigeria that you were helping to bomb back in December. And of course, immediately picked up this by CNN and blared out as a legitimate headline. The official statement by Iran was just released and posted on Truth below. Authorities are looking to determine whether or not a crime was committed on the issuance, of the fake CNN World statement, or was it a sick rogue player? CNN is being ordered to immediately withdraw this statement with full apologies for their, as usual, terrible reporting. Results of the investigation will be announced in the. Okay, well, this is. Wow, the bloke's done with his war in the Middle East. He's back to bashing CNN and left-leaning media. Right? Not that I'm CNN's biggest fan all the time, but the guy doesn't take a moment to just take a breather, does he? I mean, I'm not really sure what that's in reference to be honest with you. Clearly, what that gives impression to me is that he has no control of the situation. He has no hand on the direction of this. He's just reacting, and you know, the media. Well, CNN is doing its job. It's doing what it intended to do, which is report the news. But because it got out ahead of what Trump was intending it should, he's lashing out. That's what strikes me. Anyway, that's that map above for some of you asking. So that's another alert of Israel amid new missile launches from Iran. And since we've got leadership is almost certainly looking at events in the Middle East. I mean, on Taiwan, very quickly, as some of you may know, if you're regular on the channel, I've never really prescribed this idea that this war with Iran was some kind of deep-seated, significant grand strategy. I find that a bit of a joke, to be honest with you. I do think that the situation with Taiwan is precarious. When Trump did what he did in Venezuela, the Chinese were conducting a significant, rare amount of exercises. They were conducting a hell of a load of exercises around Taiwan, and it largely went unreported, unnoticed, or whatever, covered because of what Trump had done in Venezuela. So that being said, the United States government has been increasingly frustrated with Taiwan because they've had a bill. Taiwan has had a bill for a long time to pass the defense, to bolster their defenses. I think an increase of their budget plan. And the Trump administration has basically been sitting on the pathway of that. If they don't pass it, we will consider our relationship with Taiwan. So there was a small delegation of American Congress people, veterans, etc., who flew over to Taiwan early last month to push the Taiwanese government to get this bill through. And interestingly, today, I said this on the stream with Daniel, there was the Taiwanese opposition leader who was meeting President Xi Jinping in Beijing. So this statement by OSINT Technical, who's one of the best accounts on X for like open source surveillance, the videos and stuff like that, is very true. The Taiwanese are facing a pretty precarious situation. China is obviously going to be emboldened. The fly has decided to land on my light. So yeah, China is going to be emboldened by the reallocation of resources. Trump's seemingly disconnected interest in Asia, despite this all being about China, apparently. Yeah, that's going to put the Taiwanese in a very uncomfortable position. But yeah, that's what that post was about. So that's that. Around ballistic missiles. Yeah, 8 a.m. EST. I'm going to be very entertained to see what Pete Hegseth has to say about that. I wonder if he's going to be as bullish as he usually is, or is he going to be a little bit more... Oh, Tim Pool think Trump won. And this is why we don't listen to retards like him. Sorry, that was a bit blunt. Wait. This right here. Dr. Eli David is possibly one of the biggest disinformation accounts on X. He's just a rage baiter, and he will say whatever he can to sort of get support for Trump or Israel, or more specifically the government. And even he's like, what? That's not right. Well, that's quite hilarious. Oh my Lord. Who is this bloke? And that's why we don't pay attention to people who work in crypto. Because they write shit like this. Because you focus on... That's the problem I have with financial markets sometimes. Is, do they know stuff about, the economy? Yes, but they look at things through a very unipolar lens, right? Unidimensional. It's all about the markets, all about the financial flows. No, it's not, because the financial flows do not determine the emotional and chemical or psychological behavior of humans. You cannot apply financial markets behavior or whatever analytics to people and negotiations and diplomacy. It doesn't work like that. Whilst I'm not pretending to be an expert on everything, I'm more intelligent than that, and I don't care if that sounds self-conceited. If you think that this is a win for Trump, you are as mentally disturbed or out of whack as he has been in the past few days. That's a good tweet. I'm going to put that. Anyway, I won't show you posting that, but yeah. So anyway, I don't know what to say about that. Let me see here. Greatest president. Would like to see a video about NATO. Okay, let's talk about NATO quickly. What does this do for NATO? I don't think it does anything, to be honest with you. I don't think Trump's going to pull out of NATO, mainly because he can't. And even if he could, I don't think he would. Let's be honest, he can significantly weaken the alliance through, failing to follow through on Article 5 by making it seem that he's not committed to collective defense, collective security of broader Europe, or whatever, right? That's major. But as I made clear in a video 3-4 days ago, NATO can operate without America. It is not a alliance that is solely or entirely dependent on America, mainly because Europe has a budget of $400 billion. Yes, it's still a fraction of America's, but it's bigger than Russia's and China's combined, which is, at the time of recording, 390 billion. So, and that's with Russia in full. And there's two caveats to that. That one, that's Russia in full-time wartime footing, and Europe not. So we could see that figure, I don't know, 1.5 times bigger, maybe. I'm just taking a random picking a random number, but the point is that there is more capacity for Europe to grow theirs, whilst Russia's not really, and China's, I mean, China's always a bit of an enigma in that way. But even without the United States, NATO has a lot of potential. The official term for it is NATO minus. So take out the US, it's NATO minus. Some of you who follow me for the Ukraine content, said put Ukraine in it, and they will be. I mean, yes, Ukraine is the is at the forefront of warfare, drone warfare, and stuff like that. So they would obviously be a huge addition to the alliance. It's not that simple, though. You have to make sure that you reach certain requirements to be part of NATO, interoperability, but certainly the Ukrainian military has made a lot of progress. Now, the biggest concern, I think, is more just nuclear umbrella and logistics. In defensive capabilities, I think the Europeans can largely manage, but in terms of surveillance and the amount of provision of satellite coverage and all that sort of stuff, the Americans, that's very difficult to replace, but it's not impossible. And who's to say that we couldn't get support from other countries? Canada is very interested in still being active. And, Mark Carney has talked about middle powers banding together. So Trump could ditch NATO or simply become a sort of a dormant actor there. But Canada would still be very active, and middle powers, as Mark Carney called it. So the the Koreans, the Japanese, the Australians, these are, and you've got lots of non-major NATO allies, Morocco, Qatar, Egypt, countries that see value in NATO as an extension of their broader, or of their security. So in principle, even if Trump reduced his actions there, you may well see an uptake by Middle Eastern powers, the non-major NATO allies, to be like, well, we're keen to see NATO manage the strait. Who knows? Maybe, I'm just role-playing here with I'm just spitballing random ideas. But to me, I don't think NATO is completely dead. Is it handicapped and not going to exactly be able to do stuff as it may well have been able to with America? No, but Europe isn't nothing, and we have to be realistic. We have to think about this in a time scale, right? What time frame? What can be achieved realistically over what time frame? And Europe will have to take very committed and concerted efforts, be consistent in reallocating more money from the welfare state or whatever it is, to rebuilding our military, to modernizing it, developing it. But in theory, and this is something I'm going to be speaking with, cool announcement for those of you who went on an earlier stream, I'm going to be chatting with General Wesley Clark, who was the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO during the Kosovo War in the late 90s. So from 1997 to 2000, he oversaw all NATO military operations and therefore oversaw their actions in Kosovo. I'm not going to go into the rights or wrongs of it. Now I'm just going to talk about, I'll talk with him, obviously, but the point is, this is the kind of thing I think would be very interesting to hear from him, is that technically by having America less directly involved, it helps refine or refocus NATO's mandate on Europe, right? On Greenland, on Arctic, on the southern flank with Africa and Islamic threats or Islamic jihadism or something like that. So because with America, it's pulled NATO's focus responsibilities into the Middle East. It's brought them in. And the reason why NATO hasn't been, rightfully so, part of this situation in Iran is because Trump didn't activate Article 5. He didn't approach it in the right way. So there is no legal basis by which NATO is involved in this war, or should be, or has to be. And so if America is not as active, not as present, then it helps mean that America and NATO's focus can be more targeted to Europe's primary concern, which is Europe. Its eastern flank with Putin, its northern flank with Arctic, which will be, well, a mess with China, America, Russia up there. So, and then of course the southern flank. So I think that NATO has the capacity. Again, it all depends. There's a lot of assumptions here that European players act, or have the political capital, coordinate, behave properly. But in essence, I don't think NATO is necessarily completely dead or redundant. Do I think NATO could have launched a defensive operation? Well, yes, in theory it could have done. Again, you have to. There would have needed to be a consultation. The way that the NATO treaty works, or NATO charter works, is that it respects the sovereignty of each individual nation. So at the end of the day, a nation is willing to get it as involved or not, right? So if one country is more willing to commit troops, or is willing to commit a certain type of equipment or whatever, defensive, then they're free to do so. So in this regard, let's say the British and the French led some kind of coalition, defensive coalition in a demining capacity or whatever. They're there to purely ensure that the strait is kept open. They would consult with the rest of NATO. Trump would probably just tell them to, well, sod off and not be involved, or would just be there in a unilateral form. But you could have, theoretically, you could have a coalition of, I don't know, let's say 12 nations out of the 30 plus that are NATO involved. Some countries might not want to be, like Spain. Spain would probably not be involved at all. They wouldn't want anything to do with it. Italy might well be willing to allow NATO usage of their bases, because the NATO southern base in Naples, or near Naples, is very large. Greece and Turkey may well want to be, but Sweden may not want to be because of their history of neutrality or whatever. Finland might, because they're worried about Russia and energy, and they want to help ensure that energy alleviates the pressure on energy security in Europe. But you can use another example with Turkey. So when the Iranians were launching strikes, or when bits of projectiles were landing in Turkey and being shot down by NATO, NATO stuff, was Turkey didn't have to just. They could have activated Article 4. They could have done what Poland did back in September and push for the consultations, right? And in those consultations, the alliance will consider what they can, should, etc. do. And in this regard, they may well have thought, well, we need to securitize or support Turkey more. And so you might have seen, a bolstering of NATO forces on Turkey's soil on the southern flank or whatever like that. Turkey didn't choose to activate Article 4. And as I said in a news segment the other day, they didn't 6.5 years ago, when they decided to Erdogan decided to unilaterally launch a military operation into Syria. If some of you remember, in October 2019, they launched an operation to establish a 2-mile buffer zone against Idlib, because they were concerned about the Syrian rebels at the time. And then that's what led to HTS and the whole, well, 5 years later, they probably started working on it then. But anyway, they didn't ask for NATO support then. They just did it on their own. And that's because Turkey's the second largest standing army. It's a very potent force. I don't think enough people appreciate the capabilities of Turkey's army, to be honest with you, or their ground capabilities especially. So you could, in theory, see the NATO alliance do that, but I just don't think there was an appetite in Europe to really want to do that. There had been discussions about the British establishing this demining coalition, but it never went anywhere. And I personally don't think that the French really wanted to do more than defend their interests. They didn't want to do more than defend Cyprus and the southern flank of Europe. There was not really any. And I think what might have been a tipping point, and I said this in another video, would have been if the Houthis had decided to block the Gulf of Aden, right, Mandeb Strait, because that would be an even greater implication for trade routes to Europe. The Hormuz and energy is one thing, but Europe only receives, I think it's 6 to 9%. I can't remember the figure exactly. The biggest recipients of energy from the Gulf states is Asia. And whilst it was a setback not to have Qatari energy or gas instead of Russian, the Europeans were, willing, I guess, to pay for a bit from America. There's obviously the negotiations, discussions over allowing Russian energy again. But if the Houthis blocked the Gulf of Aden, which obviously leads up to the Suez Canal, that would have been I think that would have pushed the Europeans into a lot more action. And also Egypt. Egypt's not really been involved in much of this militarily. They are still an important player for geostrategic reasons. And being a non-major NATO ally, I think you might have seen something like that happen because it's just closer to home. But yeah, I mean, as I say, I don't think. Yeah, I don't think NATO. I don't think we're going to see much shift now. I think that the US is going to. I think. Well, I'll rephrase. So I'm trying to multitask in checking updates whilst giving you a continuous running commentary. I think that the US is going to. Trump is going to refocus his efforts now again to Cuba. I think Cuba's next. I mean, I kind of made this call back in January. I didn't ever expect Iran to be this scale. I thought it was going to be limited military operations against specific military sites. I thought they would target, energy infrastructure, but military targets, military infrastructure, military IOGC bases. But I didn't think they'd actually take out a decapitation strategy. I didn't expect this. But I then thought after that, it would be Cuba. And that's why I recorded on January 8th a video about Cuba and the situation because of the ousting of or kidnapping of seizure of Maduro, what impact that was doing for the Cuban economy, because Cuba gets, I think, 90% of its oil from Venezuela. There was an interesting article in the Financial Times or something reporting about how the Venezuelans, the Russians, right? Trump had allowed one or didn't notice that a Russian ship had gotten through into Cuba and they'd given some massive aid of oil in the past 5 days. So anyway, I think that he will turn his attention to Cuba. I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what. I don't think we're going to see an military operation. I think he's going to try and use maximum economic pressure and warfare. But I think he's also then going to start, because as we approach May and June, you've got the NATO summit. I think he's going to start hitting again Greenland. I think he's going to get bored. I think he's going to start, maybe he'll focus on domestic issues for 5 minutes. And then he'll start repressuring Greenland again, or maybe he'll try and make Canada the 51st state. What I hate is having to talk so much about one person. There's a reason I don't really like watching reality TV, as I mentioned earlier, because I don't like giving other people too much of my attention. Because why would I want to watch other people living their lives when I can live my own? I don't get it. I mean, so having to put so much focus on this one twat is incredibly annoying. I hate every time I'm, trying to maximize the videos, right? I spend a lot of time trying to do SEO, not that it seems to make a bloody difference, but I'm having to add tags or hashtags, right? And it's like Donald Trump users. I don't want to. I think I spend too much time on that, but anyway. Have I aged 5 years? Well, I haven't aged like Zelensky has. I feel so sorry for that guy. He was so young and sprightly, and he's aged a hell of a load. in that time. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm curious, actually, guys. Let me ask you a quick question. Let's have some. We seem to be now. The news seems to be. Oh, interesting. Hang on. Let me show you this from FATAC News again. Where is it? See, I'm really not a streamer, guys. I can't do streams. This. Oh wait, I need to share the screen. I'm also holding a bottle. This. 2-week ceasefire plan includes allowing both Iran and Iran to charge fees on ships. They're now Persian. Would use the money it raised for construction. It wasn't immediately clear what Oman would use its money for. Missile defenses. The Strait is the territorial waters of both Oman and Iran. The world had considered the passage in international and never paid tolls before. Yeah, I mean that font that looks like AP, Associated Press. So that's a wire organization. So Reuters, AP are a wire organization. So they just collect the news, and then major networks, broadcasters will take that, add analysis, interpret it. But that's just a summary there, and I recognize that coverage, whatever that looks like, AP. So I'm just gonna, yeah, you can see me writing on X. How exciting is that? Yeah, no, okay. So whilst I write this, guys, drop in the comments how much do you think I've aged, and how old do you think I am? Because it might surprise you. Probably some of you probably don't. All right, cool. So 41, 34, 41. What the hell, bro? Age 7 weeks. You're age 34, not age 28. Okay. Oh, 29, 26. Wow. That's great. I love this. Thanks, guys. I love how much it's like. Also, where are you guys coming from? Tell me where you guys are coming from. Some of you are regulars, some of you are new. Yeah, are you in the UK? Are you in Europe? Are you in the US? I am interested in what some of my audience are located, because I also never know really when I should be streaming or when I should be posting. I sort of post whatever. I'm 85. Yes, I do have a grumpy man, an old grumpy old man streak in me, that's for sure. Manchester, never been up there. Worcestershire, I've never been there either. Englandshire, okay. Well, I'm in Valley de Theatre. Wow, I'm so sorry for you, mate. Florida, Australia. Wow, we've got a properly Kurdistan. Wow, we've got a pretty international audience. Had the pleasure to meet you in Nottingham. Oh, huh. Where? Who were you? Where in the course? So for those of you who don't know, I started my undergrad in Nottingham University in the UK. Didn't like the course, left, moved to Southampton, and then I did my master's in the US. But anyway, wow, properly international audience. Great, love that. No, I'm 32. Yeah. Some people think I look older. Some people think I look younger. I don't know. I did used to have a bigger beard, but I'm thinking of just getting rid of it. And people are like, oh, he's Ollie, I'm disappointed. You didn't think I would, and I did. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should have kept it. Well, actually, maybe am I 32? I don't know. Maybe I'm 42. Anyway, no. I've never really been good at knowing how to do online stuff. And then when this channel grew, it was quite exciting to see how it goes. But anyway, I'm baby-faced, maybe. I clicked for the ceasefire, stayed for the accent. Yeah, you see, people don't like my accent. I get a lot of hatred from people saying that I sound too pompous, I sound like a posh twat. Some people prefer, some other channels, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, because they just sit there and mute. And, I think it's difficult being a mixture. That's why I've split the channels now. This main channel is for my solo analysis and some podcasts. But occasionally I will, I'm increasingly going to be posting interviews on the YouTube podcast channel, because for those of you who are interested, YouTube's very difficult to grow on, and it gets pernickety. Well, that is a daft word. It gets picky. Pernickety is an old-fashioned word for basically picky. It's very sensitive. So if the content's not exactly the same, you can get punished. That's why, colleagues of mine like Paul Wahlberg, right? He likes to speak to people, but he doesn't really do it on his channel. He always has his own solo analysis. And to be honest, I think there's a logic in that. So I'm trying to split the content over time. You don't have to subscribe to all of it, or it's up to you. No expectations, but yeah, it just helps the performance, I think. But anyway, so right now what we have is this. I'll just read this summary. Actually, I think it works quite well. So the US and Iran have agreed to a 2-week ceasefire with talks to begin Friday in Pakistan. So is the ceasefire in action? Is the ceasefire in effect? Yes, it is, because the Pakistani Prime Minister said that. So the 2-week ceasefire with talks to begin Friday. So 2 weeks to end the war. So that's the idea that a peace deal will be signed. That's how I interpret that. Impeccable old bean. Thank you very much, my friend. Yeah. So announcing in someone's. Oh my God! Don't do that. I'm also learning. I'm learning like. What is anyone on Duolingo? Does anyone want to do Duolingo? I have a very specific routine. So I wake up. I do my Duolingo, like 3 different languages right now. Spanish, if you're interested, I speak that quite well. Learning Italian, also learning a little bit of Russian because I'm half Russian, if you're interested. And then I look at my channel and I look at the situation. And I'm like, okay, what do I post where? How do I grow the channel, or how do I share more of the content? It's very difficult actually trying to share the content. Anyway, yes, I'm learning multiple languages as well. My enunciation is perfect. Anyway, let's be serious. I clearly suffer from getting distracted way too easily. And I don't blame some of you if you've logged off like 25 minutes ago. Actually, people might have come back and been like, is he still going? Okay, US agrees to a 2-week ceasefire. Yeah, so they're going to negotiate this in the next 2 weeks. That's the theory. So to answer a question from way earlier, what could happen the next month? Well, theoretically, worst case scenario, they talk about this, Trump doesn't like it, and this whole shit starts again. Maybe not at the same intensity, but they certainly do this. They try to do it again. I find that very hard to believe, because quite clearly the United States is aware that they have underestimated Iran and perhaps overextended themselves, overreached. So I don't think the appetite would be there, but in theory they could. In theory, the US government could be like, well, screw it. The talks aren't going. Let's just go back to what we were doing before. Alternatively, the ceasefire exists for 2 weeks and they find an agreement and it's signed. I just find that also unrealistic, though. These two, as I said before, are existentially against one another. They see each other as the antithesis, the antipathy of each other. So for them to openly and willingly sign a full peace agreement is hard to believe. I can sort of just seeing that this ceasefire becomes open-ended, that it just doesn't really resolve. It's just a North Korea, South Korea situation, an armistice. I just can't. I find it hard to imagine Trump openly and willingly agreeing to a peace deal, because I think the terms, so many of the terms that they're outlining are going to be very hard to negotiate, that they'll just sort of be like, well, we'll talk about it. And so we'll live in this new normal where Trump, in the background of all the other international stuff happening, there are the, we'll revisit this once every week, being like, so where are the Iran-US peace talks right now? When they just keep talking. for sort of an undisclosed amount of time in the future. I think realistically, the main shift will be around the Strait of Hormuz. I think you're going to see some kind of toll thing develop, shared between Oman and Iran, with some kind of backing or endorsement from the Saudis, from the Qataris, from the UAE. Yeah, the ceasefire took effect. The ceasefire between the US, Israel, and Iran took effect at 7:50, so 10 minutes before hour zero, and that all-intensive deadline. Since then, Iran has attacked Israel. Wait, that's okay. Well, this is true. So since then, Iran has attacked Israel, the UAE. So I hate people who do this. I'm going to show you this because I just find it incredibly irritating. It's hard to read. I like using emojis occasionally, but when you're just trying to read the this. So the ceasefire between the US. I need to share the screen. I should just keep showing my screen, I guess. Here we go. Right. The ceasefire between the US, Israel, and Iran took effect at 2:50 a.m. according to the announcement by the Pakistani Prime Minister. Since then, Iran has attacked Israel. Can you see how this is slightly tricky to read? Because it kind of, I know what the flag, I don't need the flags to know what the countries are. Israel, the UAE. Also, it takes ages to do that. The emoji appears, unless he types out the word twice, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, he's attacked Israel, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar. Israel has carried out strikes in Iran and Lebanon. Okay, so what? Both are just abusing it, and we're going to go back to square one? I mean, bloody well, I hope not. But yeah,
program as we have.
Well, this is more important than that. That's a critical element. Are we going to see Mojtaba finally? So those of you who don't know his name, or if you've forgotten it, the son of Ayatollah Khamenei has obviously been nowhere to be seen. We've only seen written statements from him, or whatever claimed to be from him. And some people are like, well, he's hiding. He's not going to show his face. But there is a fair counter argument to that, which is that there's been no audio recordings. So is the guy actually alive, or is this an IRGC collective showing, pretending to be the supreme leader? That's what I'm curious to know. What I'm going to do is also, Oman, peace through strength to put it. Oh, that's an old one. Oh, this is the other thing about X is everything's so. Which one of you made this? Pakistan. Okay, I'm going to put this on.
Despite the provocation from the cavalry.
Okay, I need to put more memes on the show, actually.
Right. No fighting. No fucking fighting. No fighting. No fucking fighting! Good. But the main thing is,
nice time.
You bunch of fuckers.
Brilliant.
Despite the provocation from the cavalry, no fighting.
Okay, that was absolutely lovely. Let me know, guys. Do you like what's his face? Peaky Blinders. That great period. What else have we got going on here? Yeah, I mean, what I want to know is just how much insider trading these guys have done. Wait. Oh, wow. They did like an AI overlay of it. Nah, the original's better. Okay. I'm going to leave this to play for a second, guys.
شما میراثدار سرداران میهن‌پرست و خوشنام این سرزمینید. از آریوبرزن و بهرام چوبین و سورنا تا بابک خرمدین و یعقوب لیث و مازیار، تا جهانبانی و خسروداد و رحیمی. چگونه می توانید در برابر جولان و رجزخوانی عوامل بیگانه و جنایتکار وابسته به جمهوری اسلامی در خیابانهای ایران، از هشت شعبی و حزب الله لبنان تا تروریست‌های افغانی و پاکستانی، سکوت و بیعملی پیشه کنید؟ جمهوری اسلامی و سپاه تروریستی و سرکوبگرش در برابر دیدگانتان 10,000 تن از پاکترین و شجاعترین فرزندان این کشور را سلاخی کردند و هر روز شماری دیگر را به کام مرگ می‌فرستند. این اشغالگران خاک ایران با جنون ویرانگر و آخرالزمانی کشور را در آستانه نابودی قرار داده‌اند. چگونه چشم بر این واقعیت‌ها بسته اید و از ایفای نقش در دفاع از ملک و ملت کناره گرفته اید؟ تاریخ و نسل‌های آینده ایران چگونه درباره شما داوری خواهند کرد؟ پیمان و تعهد ملی و میهنی خود را به یاد آورید. به میدان بیایید. از شرافت و اعتبار ارتش ملی ایران در برابر جمهوری اسلامی و مزدوران بیگانه اش دفاع کنید. و خطاب به شما ملت بزرگ ایران، با صدای رسا خواستار ایفای نقش ملی ارتش شوید. از آنها بخواهید به وظیفه خود در قبال میهن و ملت عمل کنند تا بیش از این دیر نشده در کنار ملت بایستند و ایران را نجات دهند. پاینده ایران.
Yeah, I mean, that never really amounted to much before. Anyway, right, well, where were we? So, wow, you guys all watched the entire... Wow, I'm amazed you guys are still here. I've never left the screen before. I just did it again. Just shutting the door because my girlfriend's asleep and she probably thinks I'm insane and this is the end of my relationship. You couldn't read the subtitles. All right, let's watch it again.
خطاب به ارتشیان ایران. شما میراثدار سرداران میهن‌پرست و خوشنام این سرزمینید. از آریوبرزن و بهرام چوبین و سورنا تا بابک خرمدین و یعقوب لیث و مازیار، تا جهانبانی و خسروداد و رحیمی. چگونه می توانید در برابر جولان و رجزخوانی عوامل بیگانه و جنایتکار وابسته به جمهوری اسلامی در خیابانهای ایران، از هشت شعبی و حزب الله لبنان تا تروریست‌های افغانی و پاکستانی، سکوت و بیعملی پیشه کنید؟ جمهوری اسلامی و سپاه تروریستی و سرکوبگرش در برابر دیدگانتان 10,000 تن از پاکترین و شجاعترین فرزندان این کشور را سلاخی کردند و هر روز شماری دیگر را به کام مرگ می‌فرستند. این اشغالگران خاک ایران با جنون ویرانگر و آخرالزمانی کشور را در آستانه نابودی قرار داده‌اند. چگونه چشم بر این واقعیت‌ها بسته اید و از ایفای نقش در دفاع از ملک و ملت کناره گرفته اید؟ تاریخ و نسل‌های آینده ایران چگونه درباره شما داوری خواهند کرد؟ پیمان و تعهد ملی و میهنی خود را به یاد آورید.
Okay, I think we get the point. Just a point on that, actually. Let's talk about Reza Pahlavi for a second. Now, some of you who've followed me from the beginning or know me from my early coverage of Iran know that I support the Iranian people's right to choose, to self-determination. And a few years ago, when Mahsa Amini was killed and the subsequent protests occurred, if you remember, 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, late 2022, there were significant uprisings. And I was not that informed about Iran. And I got caught up in the excitement, in the sort of a lot of people who support a monarchy in Iran returning. I became very sort of caught up in that idea. But this time around, I've been more, I think, subdued on it, because I think it's just the realism around it. The practical realities of achieving something like that is quite difficult. And to be honest with you, the Iranians are not a, it's not as simple as to say that Iran is completely supportive of sort of ousting the IGC. I think it's a very complicated picture. I think that a lot of Iranians were not too fussed about the system as it was. They were more just wanting a reduction in corruption. They wanted less people being mistreated, more rights for women, more, especially under the previous leader to Pezeshkian Raisi. There was a big emphasis on reduction of corruption. And so I think a lot of Iranians were just disillusioned with the system, but not completely to the point that they wanted a new leader or a new system like a monarchy. And there's a lot of speculation around just how much support really America had, or the Trump administration really had, for Reza Pahlavi, the crown prince on your screen. He's a nice guy. Now, some of you may have watched the video I interviewed one chap who, well, I mean, he was critical of the crown prince, but to a point where it was more just a sort of personal vendetta. The guy just didn't like him because he knew him, and he didn't like the fact that he, I think, had kicked him out of his inner circle or something. But bottom line is that the Trump administration never really felt that Reza Pahlavi had the serious inclination or capacity to be the leader of the country, or at least the full-time returning sort of Shah. As a transitional figure, perhaps, but it'd have to be part of a broader framework towards like elections or whatever they had in mind, whatever the American government had sort of envisaged. And I think it's because he's been inconsistent in his approach. Back in January, when most people reckon the IRGC conducted the significant killings of Iranians, January 6th to the 8th, that's when he called for them to all be out on the streets at a certain time in a certain place. So and that was the first time that he made these calls, but he then didn't really make much after that. So I think he felt guilty or culpable for what happened, because I didn't really hear much from him afterwards. I'm not going to pretend that I knew exactly what he was saying. I don't follow his page explicitly. This is the first time he's really come up with one of these direct calls to action since January, in my understanding. So that was 3 months ago. So again, as I say, there's no heartfelt sort of hatred towards him. There's nothing personal. I just don't know how well placed he would be to lead the country. And I don't think many Iranians would be effectively supported. I think there's a large proportion of people who do support him in principle, but I think that tends to be more the diaspora. I think it tends to be people who are strongly sort of idolizing the idea of a monarchy. And I like to, I live in Britain, it's like constitutional monarchy. But whether that would be the most effective thing for Iran, a constitutional monarchy, or just a full-fledged republic, I mean, we're not going to get that anyway. The situation as it stands is that the Iranian, the Islamic Republic, the IRGC remains in control of the country and is not going anywhere, and are going to be controlling the Strait of Hormuz more than they were before. Just tweeting something. Right, let's see what the latest updates are. And then it's 2 a.m. We're an hour past the intended time that we were going to see the ultimatum. Prices today: US crude down 14%, Brent crude oil down 13%, gasoline down 10%, heating oil 17%. Yeah, there's quite a lot of. So coming from coming from United Nations correspondent at AP, Farnoosh, don't know you, I'm going to follow you. An official from one of the mediating countries tells me that the 11th hour deal between the US and Iran came together after the involvement of two unlikely actors. Vice President J.D. Vance and China. Vance was looped in late Tuesday, and China helped get Iran on board. What do we make of that? So her name is Farnoosh Amiri. She works for the Associated Press as the United Nations correspondent. I don't really know what to make of that, to be honest. I mean, my initial reaction to that is it kind of makes sense from Vance's perspective. He's been opposed to this war ever since it happened. Why would he suddenly... I mean, if there is an opportunity to sort of draw down, I guess he would do so. China, I mean, they have... It's unclear to how much power they have over Iran, but I guess it makes sense for both of them, rationally speaking. Vance wants the war to stop because it's ruining his chances as a MAGA inheritor, in the subsequent election. And China doesn't really want more of this because it is obviously affecting its economy. China has, I think it was 4 or 5 months worth of reserves in terms of oil or energy that it could rely on before things started getting really hairy. No, Vance got the US on board, or whatever, was like working on that end whilst China was working on the Iranian end. Yeah, so all of you on YouTube and podcasts are fear-mongering over Tucker all day. Well, I mean, it's just an embarrassment for Trump. Anyone who can somehow try to frame this as a win for Trump are as disillusioned and bonkers as Trump has been in the past 4 or 5 days. The fanaticism, the obsession, the cult of personality that these people have around Trump is, I think it even outdoes sort of George Manson, isn't it? Whoever the serial killer was, right? I've never seen so much ideological delusional. Yeah, it's just insane. I mean, I care too much about my own life to sort of love anyone to such an extent. I have heroes in my life, but there's no one that I can put on such a pedestal and literally love them so much that it will be like, nah, he's not. No, he's fine. The guy is nuts. I don't know. I mean, I need to speak to a constitutional lawyer, professor, expert about what would it take to get this guy out of the place, because he needs to go. Charles Manson, thank you, not George Manson. Charles Manson. His album is on YouTube, really. Yeah, please do like the button, everyone. Please do like the videos. Do subscribe if you haven't already. This is the longest live stream I think I've ever done, 2.5 hours. No, actually, I think I did a 2-hour one after the reaction of Zelensky in the Oval Office in January last year. No, realistically, I think that the US is... I don't see how this can be sold as a win. What I have seen, though, some of you asking about how the MAGA crowd are framing it. The MAGA crowd are framing that Trump forced Iran to accept the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. So his team, his community will frame this as that he was the master negotiator that helped frame this to the Iranians, that they have to open the Strait of Hormuz, otherwise he will do something. I don't know what the fuck that is, that other thing is, but that he will do something. So, yeah, Brittany Ray, ceasefire, Hormuz opening, Trump won. There's a good example. Brittany Ray, Republican mother, 6th generation Floridian, no links. Looks AI, to be honest with you. Doesn't even look real. Yeah, no. And actually, can we just take a step back for a second, in all seriousness, and appreciate what humanity has done when we stop fucking around and work together? Artemis 2 has become the furthest that humans have ever left planet Earth. The other side of the moon, for the first time, properly seeing for 40 minutes out of contact with Houston, with the planet, demonstrating what humans can do, the progression of human endeavor when we actually work together. There's a quote from, I think it's Edgar Mitchell, who is I think it's Edgar Mitchell. No, not Edgar Mitchell. Who was his name? Or was it Edgar Mitchell? Yes, it is. Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell. And he said this amazing quote, which I just want to read to you for a second. Where is the full quote? Yeah, that'll do. So why is it foggy? So you develop an instant global consciousness, a people orientation, an intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world, and a compulsion to do something about it. From out there on the moon, international politics looks so petty. You want to grab a politician by the scruff of the neck and drag him 250,000 miles out and say, look at that, you son of a bitch. I love that quote very much. I remember hearing it for the first time when I was 10. I've always had an interest in astrophysics and the idea of, ulterior life and stuff like that. Aside from my day job of talking about politics, I have a lot of passion for other things, and physics, or the idea of astrophysics and the stars, is one of them. And I find that quote incredibly powerful because it to me adds a stark reminder of what we as humans should be focusing on. We should be focusing on international cooperation, right? To use the USSR and America, right? When the International Space Station was created, and we've got Americans, astronauts, cosmonauts, Russians coming together to go up there to work on actually building something. Metaphorically, like building our future, right? Building the capacity of humans to explore, not blowing each other up or destroying shit. And that's a particular reason I hate the Trump administration, because they seem to take enjoyment and a huge amount of satisfaction in destroying or threatening to destroy stuff, be it economically, militarily, whatever. The sort of that the use of military power is somehow cool. And yeah, don't get me wrong, I love explosions. I like watching stuff blow up, but it's just so, I don't know. They're just compensating for something, right? Clearly Trump's overcompensating for something. It's like a bloke buying a sports car, right? He's got to overcompensate for something smaller. So yeah, I wish we could work more on international cooperation. And that's why, in principle, I still like the idea of the UN. Do I think it's kind of useless and not relevant? Unfortunately, yeah, of course. But in principle, I like it because it's the effort of humans to try to create something that works together. That we as humans can actually collaborate, we can cooperate, we can resolve our issues, or at least come to a common area common space where we can try to resolve our issues through dialogue. Is it perfect? No, but it's never going to be perfect because we as humans are imperfect. Sounds so cliche, but we as humans are imperfect, and therefore the systems we create are imperfect. Maybe we should just give all our decision making over to AI. ChatGPT can decide. Oh, that'd be good. But no, I'm joking. I just wish we could work more towards more towards constructive progression as a human race, and not towards the destruction of civilizations die today, to quote Trump. They faked the Artemis mission. Right. Did they fake the moon landing as well? After the fall of the USSR, NATO should have been dismantled. That's something I'm going to ask General Wesley Clark. So let's wrap up, guys. Let's do a sort of a summary of everything, right? Earlier today, Donald Trump made a 85-word post. In that post, he threatened to end a civilization. A civilization would die today unless complete agreement to the opening of the Strait of Hormuz was reached. That was built on the previous days of "you crazy bastards, F this, F that," and an implicit sense by people more educated than me in this area that Trump's threats today could be interpreted as a genocidal threat. Some people went as far as to think that that meant he would utilize a nuke. What has happened in the subsequent afternoon, in the hours since, is a whirlwind of diplomatic activity led first and foremost by Pakistan, but inevitably incorporating many other actors behind the scenes. I think the Saudis would have been communicating with the Pakistanis over their perspective. JD Vance has seemingly been brought in, according to that last person I read, and China was brought in. So as always, it is never just one single entity or just Iran in the US. And what is also interesting, that Israel hasn't really been involved with this at all. Trump has decided to deal directly with Iran. He has had enough of Netanyahu in this regard. Maybe it was Netanyahu, how much in Iran Israel talked America into this. But the bottom line is that the United States is dealing directly with the Iranians. And it was Trump that moved first in accepting the terms of a ceasefire, a 2-week ceasefire, where negotiations will occur on Friday, April 10th, but we have no guarantee of what happens next. In my opinion, I think that people who predict, X, Y, or something will definitely happen are talking horseshit. But we can take inferences, we can take suggestions based on the information that we have. And in my opinion, I think that the war in Iran is going to, I think it's going to be risky, because I think that the Israelis and Iranians may well continue to take pot shots at each other. Whilst the Americans want out, the Israelis may not want to be out. And therefore, you could see a very difficult position where the Israelis continue putting the Americans at risk, and the Iranians being like, well, we can't negotiate a peace deal with you until you get your Israeli counterparts under control. And so maybe that will hasten Trump to think, well, you're still threatening Israel, we'll continue this. I'm not inclined to go that way. I do think that there is a genuine intent on both sides to see an end to this, but you can't rule it out. We've seen this happen before, albeit to a lesser intense extent or scale, but I do think it's possible. But of course, then this brings us back to the reality, which is that Trump is not over with his foreign policy interests. Cuba is very much a possibility. And of course, many people do emphasize that all this thing is about the Epstein files. It's about a distraction from that. And I mean, I'm so fed up of seeing his face all over the place, hearing his name. There's a reason I don't really talk about the Epstein files, because I don't know. But I think that this is a pretty clear, I don't know if it's a loss, but it's not a win for the United States. I don't think Trump will be seen by anyone of a reasonable mind as the sort of they don't come out on top in this regard. And I think it is a win for the Iranians or the IGC, because they remain in power. They remain to fight another day, and much of the country is in disarray, is damaged beyond repair, and now they're going to be able to dictate the terms over the Strait of Hormuz, which was a free-flowing passage of water, and now it's going to be a toll booth. Yes, it's going to be shared likely with the Omanis, and there's going to be arrangement or an understanding, a support, a backing from the Saudis, from the Gulf states. But I think that's a net negative, to be honest with you, for the Americans. But hey, America doesn't really care, because they didn't really get much energy. They're energy self-sufficient right now, at least. So who's going to be paying for that? The Asian states. So, will people claim, oh, well, this is part of a grand strategy. Trump did this, and therefore, China's now paying for the energy. Well, so does Japan. I'm very interested to see what happens from here on out. April, we're only in the first week of April. April's going to be bumpy, and we're far from over. But everyone, I think I will be drawing it there tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. What time is it? Yeah, 2:25. That's a good time. We've got 2 hours 46. Yeah, they have not agreed to any plan. No, they've just agreed to a ceasefire. The ceasefire is... Well, let's just discuss that briefly, quickly. The ceasefire is not yet determined in terms of its conditions. It is still going to be in a difficult situation. But in my opinion, I think that they are going to agree to the terms in principle, and therefore it will likely hold. The biggest question for me is, can you realistically see the Trump administration, with the ego that man has, agreeing to an actual peace deal, which is quite clearly not going to be seen as a win for the United States government, because they will be agreeing to a set of terms which ultimately were worse than what they were before. So therefore that leaves you with an armistice where both sides don't really agree to anything. They just agree to stop fighting. I'm going to end on this emphasis that this is open-ended in the direction of calling an end to the intensity of conflict, but I don't think it's like it. But the counter argument is that because the US never declared war, then technically it's not a peace deal isn't necessary. Don't know. It's a tough one. Got some legal experts coming on. We've got Wesley Clark coming on, going to an event next week in New York. I'll see if I can meet some people in the city. If you're any recommendations, then drop me a line. You can find my email in the description and stuff. But otherwise, guys, thanks a lot. I've outlasted, I think, everybody else in streams. So we'll take it easy, but we'll see you tomorrow. All right. Thanks, guys.